Ladies and gentlemen, we are very, very lucky today. We have a very special guest joining us at Intrinsic Education. Graham Codrington from Tomorrow Today Global, who is a massive friend of education's, who has done so much work. I've actually heard Graham speak a number of times at conferences. He has helped a number of schools and actually is still involved in education. He currently sits on the board of St. Mary's Waverley. So Graham, it's wonderful to have you here. We're going to be talking a little bit about education and what that might look like, what it looks like now, I suppose, and what it might look like going forward. And then, hopefully just a few kind of thoughts from yourself as to exactly how we might be putting things into place as we move forward. Folks, for those of you, many of you will know Graham. Of course, if you haven't heard Graham speak and if you haven't followed his work, please do. If you're on Facebook or any social media, go on and follow him. He really has some interesting thoughts. And it's well worth a read and a listen to. So Graham, like I say, thanks so much for joining us. And I think the first thing, I'm going to dive straight into this because I know we're very, kind of limited for time. And really, give us a bit of an outline as to where you feel we currently are, sort of a bit of a scenario, set the context for where we are and where we should be, or what we should be thinking about moving forward in education.
Sure. Thanks, Craig, and thanks for the opportunity. I kind of start all presentations these days. I am a doctor, but my doctor's in leadership and future studies, not in medicine. And so anything I say here is not a medical opinion in the middle of a medical crisis and a global pandemic. But obviously, I track trends and I look at data and research what's happening. And, we can see all around the world now, in every country in the world, how different countries are handling the coronavirus crisis. And that gives us a little glimpse into the future, literally the next few weeks and months. And right now, it's very clear that there is no ways that we can go back to normal anytime in the next few months. As we're recording this, Craig, we're not exactly sure what's going to happen in South Africa with the phasing out of lockdown. There's no doubt it will be phased out over an extended period of time. And I think schools will discover that the documents that are going around in the background is the government's plan, which is to phase school back in two ways. The first is to phase in grade by grade, rather than just having the whole school come back at the same time. And secondly, continue to ask schools to do physical distancing in both the staff room and the classroom. And of course, in some schools, in private schools, that may be slightly possible and easier. You can't imagine in under-resourced schools how that's even going to be possible. And so we are going to be facing an extended period where there is no normal in the school environment. And honestly, we have to get our heads around this. When I say extended period, I mean until the middle of 2021. Yeah. Until we have a vaccine or have developed herd immunity, whichever comes first. And that's going to take us 12 to 18 months. Unless we are prepared to sacrifice a few million people to the disease, which I don't think anybody wants to do. So, Craig, I don't know what you're seeing and what you're hearing. I don't know if in your interaction with school leaders, people have had enough of a mindset wake up that this isn't about rescuing the 2020 academic year and trying to get back to normal as quickly as possible. We're in a crisis mindset right now, but we have to get out of crisis and into this new reality mindset, I think, for at least 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, Graham, I think that you hit the nail on the head, and I think that is where we're at the moment. I think the sense I get from the school leaders that I'm speaking to is the big thing is this not knowing. We don't have information, so we can't act. And you're getting two sides of it. You're getting some schools who are going, hell for leather down a route of trying to provide something, and you have other schools who are just sitting back and going, we can't make a decision because we don't have information. And yes, there is a kind of sense of a split between the government education versus independent, but I do think all teachers, whether they're in no matter which sector they're in, are suffering from high levels of anxiety and this kind of worry of not knowing. So So yeah, I think, I mean, that's a really good starting point, I suppose. Knowing what we know, which is of course very little, and being, in this position of not knowing. What advice would you potentially give teachers on how they operate?
Well, I think probably the first advice is you always have to prepare for the worst and plan for the best. And I do think, Craig, you're absolutely right about this not knowing. I really hope we do get some clarity. Sadly, it looks at the moment as if the education department's plan is to hold on as long as possible to try and see if we can rescue the academic year. I understand that. There's not a criticism in saying that, but I personally think it's completely unrealistic. I think it's completely unfair, for example, on matric students to say that the matric exams have been set and you will write them.
Yeah.
Because I think it's impossible to get through the matric curriculum this year. And I think even if you can force through the curriculum in terms of hours, half of the students are in psychological distress.
Absolutely.
And you're not in a space of learning, you're not in a space of growth and development. And that leads then into what I think teachers need to hear. So the first thing is, if you can, as a school, I know a lot of schools are powerless because the department must make a decision, and we pretty much, the independent and government schools, especially around the matric, have to kind of make the same decision. You can't have the independent schools writing and the matric and the government schools not writing matric this year, for example, or the other way around.
Yeah.
You can't even have some schools writing early and others writing late. Of course not. So it does have to be a systems decision, and so you're kind of powerless until the system decides. And yet you're not powerless as a teacher, and especially as a school leader. We'll talk about that later. I think we should let our voices, your voices as professionals, be heard. And part of that is beginning to say, let's not try and get back to normal. So prepare for the worst, which is a completely disrupted 2-year period. What you need to do as a teacher is look after yourself, firstly. Look after your own physical well-being. If you're in a vulnerable group or live with a family member who's vulnerable, you have to have this conversation with your head to say, how can you keep physical distance and keep yourself secure as a teacher? Keep your mental health together. Teachers are under immense pressure. To adjust now to this new reality, to develop new skills, to support hundreds of families who are also in distress. So honestly, you've got to give yourself a bit of a gap. And a lot of teachers took the recent holidays to work. So you haven't had a break yet. And now you're into this back-to-back online Zoom meetings and then interacting with kids and parents and curriculum development. You can't burn yourself out because we need you. We need you for 2 years. Nobody's allowed to retire in the next 2 years. Nobody's allowed to leave the profession. We need you. So run a marathon, not a sprint here, please. And that might mean pushing back and just saying, no, I can't do that now. And slowing down. That advice, by the way, should go to the parents and the students as well. I think if we come out of this period, however long the period is, I might be wrong. It might be 3 months and we find a vaccine. It might be 4 months and the virus mysteriously disappears. Who knows what could happen? But if you're prepared for a marathon and you end up only having to run half of it, you're still in good shape. If you thought you were running a sprint and it turns out it's a marathon, you're going to die. And so we've got to help parents, we've got to help students to primarily, most important thing is get through 2 years intact. The second thing you need to do as a teacher is to recognize, I truly believe, and Craig, you may have a view on this, that you are not going to get through more than 1/3 of your curriculum this year. Again, prepare for the worst, plan for the best. But I think if you're in any way attempting to get through more than half your curriculum, I understand matric is a special case, and I'll leave that maybe for another day. But for everybody else, the focus is on helping your, psychological, physical, mental well-being. Secondly, help kids to love learning. Wouldn't it be disastrous if we got through the curriculum, but everybody hated it?
Yeah.
And they came back to school absolutely just having been destroyed in their love of learning, because we just made it horrible for them,
Quite
even though they learnt the facts and the data. That's not education. We know that. And so let's focus on a love of learning. Let's focus on helping them engage with the content. And teachers, that's where genius shines through. That's where your profession shines through. You take that dusty and dry curriculum, and every day you turn it into something marvelous. But you've been trying to do that face to face in a classroom. So the third thing I'd say to teachers is breathe, step back. I honestly would take a week or two. If I was a teacher, I would go rogue and just not give work to the kids. I would give them a minimum amount of work, and I would spend my time doing curriculum development and adjustment to the digital world, doing webinars that help me learn how to get into the digital space. I don't think that teachers, you are going to find this difficult. You're professional educators. You might have resisted it in the past for good reason, because face-to-face is better. Don't have that option now. So step up. You are professional. You can do this. Bring everything you know about teaching into the digital space. And now you don't have a choice. So do it as brilliantly as you know you can. And that means probably taking a gap, taking a breather from all this crisis stuff mindset that we've been spinning on in the last 3 or 4 weeks, and just pausing.
Yeah.
And so maybe, Craig, I can talk to the school leaders now.
Yeah, I
Because school leaders,
was just going to say that's probably a great point to follow on and say, well, if this is advice we're giving to parents, and to teachers, kind of a word to the leaders and say, on the back of that, what do you do?
You have to run the marathon here, people. As a school leader, yes, I know part of you thinks you need to justify the school fees that some parents might start questioning in the next few weeks if you don't dump content onto them. But you're going to destroy this thing. 3 months from now, everybody's just going to walk away, honestly. If you, again, whatever the government department decides around this, you're going to be disrupted for the rest of this year. So just make that decision as a school leader. That's it. This year is different. Even if kids start coming back to school, I think they will come back to school and do quite a lot of stuff at home still. They'll come to school for tutorial groups, and if they're in primary school, they'll come to school for reading and things like that, and then go home, because they'll come in shifts and phases, and it is going to be completely disrupted. So you don't have to have all of your plans in place by the 4th of May. You don't have to spin your wheels right now. One of those, what do they call it? Cars where you kind of spin your wheels and then hit the brake and you drag car,
drag racing.
down. That's not the mode we should be in, and you shouldn't be in that mode as a school leader either. I honestly, if I was a school leader, I know this is simplistic and I'm not a school leader, but I would honestly take a 2-week holiday right now.
Yeah.
No matter what holidays you have or haven't had, I would send a minimum amount of work home. I would focus on reading. I might send novels home and reading materials, and ask parents to just read with their kids for the next week or two. I would then give every teacher a day or two off to just breathe. And then I would come back with a strong emphasis on teacher training. And get clusters together in terms of educational development. School leaders, you should be reaching out to other schools so that the best history teacher in your cluster of schools, in your circuit of schools, that's the person who develops the curriculum and records the lesson. You don't have to have 50 teachers all duplicating content right now. Just find the best teacher in your province, the best teacher in your country. I don't know, the best teacher in the world. Geography is irrelevant now because we're all at home. So that's what I think your job as a HOD, as a principal is to help your teachers up their game, not get crank curriculum out and crank engagement out, but up their game in the background, because you've got 2 years of doing this, not just 2 months. And you will know what to do beyond that.
Graham, just to support your point there, I've been working with a school, and their principal has decided that even if they're told they're going back on the 4th, that he is going to only bring his, and yes, he's in an independent school, but he's only going to bring his students back 10 days later. And he's going to use that
Absolutely.
interim period to actually bring his staff in, to do staff training, to upskill them in terms of what it is they're going to do. But a really important part, and I think this is something that school leaders must also embrace, is they're looking at the kind of socio-emotional kind of support that they're going to offer their kids and their teachers in what is a very difficult
Absolutely.
time. And that's another part of us. I think, our leaders realizing that the human side of things is probably more critical now than anything, isn't it?
Absolutely. And at least 20% of your staff should be repurposed to support in terms of psychological well-being and support, not curriculum dumping.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to be rude in that, but not the classroom type thing. This might be your sport staff,
Yeah.
your coaches who not needed anymore on the sports field because we're taking a break. It might be individual, music teachers and things like that. People who have a different relationship in the school system
Absolutely.
with the
I'm going to
students
say who naturally are
anyway.
very good at this.
Yeah. And then there might be a few teachers who would naturally be better at the counseling side and the support side, where you almost want to have like a TA system in a school, in every classroom. So you've got a teacher teaching, but then you have a backup support. So the kids who are feeling psychologically at risk, people who are maybe struggling through circumstances, there's some kind of support. Can we get you data? What's happened with your computer that you can't connect to the class? Follow up with kids who don't come to class. You can't just let that be. And that we know is the real side of school anyway. The hidden curriculum is now that support behind the scenes in this digital world.
Absolutely.
But Craig, I mean, we could speak for hours on this. I just want to finish with one final thought, and this thought might be a bit early, but I want to put it into the leaders' minds already. Yes, probably May is going to be you trying to find this new balance between you were sprinting in April, now you realize it's a marathon, you've got to slow down the pace, get everybody into the right rhythm. So May is going to be hard work. June, I hope, is going to be set aside for policy and system conversations.
Yeah.
I hope we see lots of department heads connecting during June, realizing that it is too ambitious to try and rescue the academic year, that we are going to have to come up with a different plan. And then in July, you might want to come back and watch this last minute of this recording.
Yes.
Because I hope that you start shifting towards an opportunity mindset.
Brilliant.
And what I mean by that is I've always had to temper my voice when I come and speak to educators. I understand that some of my crazy thoughts around disruption, just blow everything up, experiment with everything, that can work if I'm working with a corporate company that's in the digital space and so on. Educators have to be conservative by nature, because if you try something and you stuff up people's lives and futures. And so you naturally have to push back against crazy people like me. But now you don't have to, because it's stuffed up anyway. 2020 is stuffed up and 2021 will be stuffed up. And so you will never, ever in the next century have a better opportunity to do educational experiments than you have now. And so all of the disruptions we've been thinking about and talking about for the last, I've been prattling on in education spaces for 15 years.
Yeah.
We've been talking about some of the stuff. Let's do it, guys. Let's do it now. And I hope that some of you get together and do it scientifically, so that this school tries that particular thing, and then another school tries another particular thing. And you are very particular about what you're trying, and you hold the line for the rest of 2020, and you get together at the end of the year and you say, right, what did work and what didn't work? We have the remarkable opportunity of having 12 to 15 years completely stuffed up now in the system. And we can't do more damage than has already been done by COVID-19. So let's get out there and disrupt education and do the things we wanted to do. Maybe people will realize we didn't need a matric certificate anyway, because I think that's one of the experiments we should be thinking about.
Yeah.
This high stakes assessment is insane. Maybe that's too much to ask. So come back. The types of assessments your teachers have been doing, the best thing they can do is cancel June and July exams right now. Just tell everybody there are no assessments in June and July. And then we might discover we didn't miss anything. Nobody lost anything because we didn't have an assessment in mid-year. Maybe we never go back to mid-year assessments. That's the type of opportunity mindset I'm thinking.
Okay.
And it will only happen if you stop being in crisis mode.
Yeah.
If you think you're just trying to solve a problem for the next 2 months and then we can go back to normal, you're going to miss everything. You're going to miss everything that's happening around you. You're going to burn everybody out and miss both what's actually happening in front of you for 2020 and the opportunity of a lifetime. So, sorry, that was a little bit of a soapbox, Craig, but I hope people hear that, and I hope the heads and school leaders step back and step up at the moment. That would be my message to school leaders. Step back and step up. Be strategic now, and allow people to breathe into the space. I think that's the best thing you could do now.
I think that is absolutely wonderful advice, Graham. I think already, and just to speak to the last bit you mentioned, I think there were schools who were already going down this path of saying the current education system is not, the current education that we're offering is not fit for purpose. Let's look at how we change it. And absolutely right. There's an opportunity now for us to really be creative and to do something that can forever put us on the front foot. Patrick Lencioni, the work that he does, he talks of there's only two options. We either come out of this worse off than we were, or we come out of it better than we were. There's no staying the same. And I love that. And I think if we have that mindset that we're going to be better and we embrace those opportunities, then I think absolutely right. We could really make sure that we come out of this thing on the front foot rather than the other. And, Graham, I love the provocations that you've given us. I think you make some very, very good points, and I don't even have to add to them as an educationist, because I agree 100% with them. Thank you so much for your time. It is always wonderful, Craig, kind of listening to your thoughts. You were going to say.
Thank you, my pleasure. Thank you for the work that you're doing, and just a big thank you to anyone who watches this, a teacher, a school leader. Thank you so much for your contribution, and the contribution in advance that I know you are going to make. I think schools will come out of this, if they do it well, will come out of this as centers in communities that brought well-being back to society. And if there's anything I can do to help, as I said, in the past, I've been like a crazy voice shouting from the outside, trying to catalyze change. I want to bring whatever I can bring in terms of getting us to not waste this opportunity right now. So if that's something that will be useful, please contact me. And this is my contribution to getting us through the crisis. So and work with people like Craig and others. We're passionate about helping all of you to not waste this crisis, and not be overwhelmed by it either. Thanks, Craig.
Graham, thank you so much for your time. And I have no doubt there are many people who are listening to this who are going to have these little pearls of wisdom that can hopefully then create some really creative thought that comes out. And I do hope they reach out to you. I hope I'm sure many of them are already listening to you, and I'm sure they'll now start listening, more will. Thank you for everything that you've done and that you are doing during this crisis. I really enjoy listening to what it is you're sharing. Folks, to those of you out there, I hope this has been a very, very useful conversation for you, and that it has given you some food for thought moving forward. Stay safe out there, everyone.